These abstract face sculptures seem to be trending all over Instagram as high-end home decor pieces. And since I wanted to try to create some of my own home decor, I gave this a shot. You guys saw my first attempt on YouTube Shorts, but this time I wanted to make something a little better quality and more polished than the first one. Anyways, I've begun the process by first creating the base layer with some tissue paper and just rolling everything into a ball. The ball will determine the approximate size of your sculpture, so make it as small or as large as you want it to be, taking into consideration how much clay you have on hand. I used around 2 packs of 500 grams for this size. Air dry clay needs to be kneaded to get out any air bubbles, and if you have some old clay, mix it together with the new clay to get an even consistency. I sometimes use water, but I don't want to put too much water here because air dry clay does tend to crack if you have too much water in your mixture. Afterwards, just roll it out with some light pressure. I am trying to make a circular piece here, sort of, but just something enough to cover the ball of tissue paper that we created. Once everything has been rolled out smoothly using a rolling pin, you can go ahead and cover the tissue paper with your air dry clay. It's going to take a bit of effort to smoothen things out. I'm using some water to help bind the clay together where the ends meet. And to smoothen and strengthen the joint area of the clay, I'm going to just use some of my clay tools. The one with teeth works extremely well to make groove marks so that the clay has some friction to mold together. And then I am going to go in with my flat edge one, which really just helps smoothen all of everything out so that you don't see any of these groove marks. I'll link these products in the description. They are relatively inexpensive and very helpful if you are doing a lot of clay projects. Afterwards, it is time to make the facial features. The trick here is to use a ruler to map out the correct proportions of a face. I found the center point by marking a vertical and horizontal line. I also mapped out the cheek area, drawing 2 diagonal lines. And as we are doing an abstract, don't worry too much about getting it exact, but just having these guides will help everything look more proportioned. If you can see in my first video, I actually didn't map out the face, and I found that I had made the nose a little too big or the eyes a little too sunken. So having guides really helps just sort of make everything look a little bit more realistic while still maintaining the abstractness of the entire project. I mean, well, if there is such a word, but anyways, let's go on with this. The first feature to add is the chin to elongate the face. A lump of clay will do, and just smoothen it out using some clay tools and water. Then we are going to measure again, this time dividing the face into thirds. This helps determine where the eyes, the nose, and the other facial features should go. Use the image that I posted here as a reference. Now for the nose, let's just roll out a small piece of clay. I like to make the nose a little pointy, like forming a triangle that slowly slants as we go towards the nose bridge area. I wish that shaping my own nose was as simple as this, but since it's not, I'm going to go ahead and sculpt a pretty nose for this guy instead. Then to attach the nose, we are going to make some slits at the back of the nose area and the area of the face in which it will lie on top of. Add a little bit of water just to make it sticky and attach. I'm using small downward strokes with a little bit of pressure to combine everything together and to get rid of any harsh lines. For the mouth area, there are a few ways to do this. You can sculpt a mouth and attach it like the way we did with the nose, or like what I'm doing here is simply pushing the clay gently to make a lip. See what method works best for you. For this particular piece, I wanted something that looked a little bit more sunken, which is why I'm doing this pushing technique instead. It's also good to define the middle of the lip with a little slant or two to make that Cupid's bow more prominent. Again, this is abstract, and I've seen some sculptures without this part of the lip and they still look really good. So it's really up to you on how realistic you want your face sculpture to be. To define the lower part of the lip, I'm pushing some clay just above the chin area and then sculpting downwards to blend. I've also dipped a paintbrush into water in order to smoothen out any harsh lines. You can also use water to help get rid of any fine hairline cracks that may appear, especially on the folds between the lips. Then for the eyes, which is the fun part in my opinion, I start from the center line and remove the part of the clay going up towards the first third division line. You want to make sure that you are taking off more of the clay the nearer you get to the top to give the eyes a more defined look. Then I'm going to just gently scrape everything with this flat edge tool, which really helps chisel and define the eyes. If you need it to glide a little bit more smoothly, you can try dipping the tool in water first. Also, a photo of the sort of head sculpture that you want is really useful here to see exactly where the lines of the eyes start and terminate. Take your time with this. I think this is probably the facial feature that took me the longest to actually get to a point in which I was happy with it. For the forehead, if it is looking a little too big, you can scrape off parts of the side. Actually, I find that using the flathead tool is useful for defining a more chiseled look, like as if the head sculpture is carved out of stone and not clay. So just keep brushing in the same direction, and then once you want a different angle, move there and repeat. Use a bit of water to smoothen things out as needed. Moving on to the ears, I just shaped 2 kidney-shaped clay pieces and attached again using the same techniques of scoring and scraping down gently to position everything in place. So the top of the ear usually lines up where the curve of the eyes meet the cheek. Then I imagined an imaginary hairline and put the ears behind that. Make sure that both the sides are lined up when you are looking at your sculpture from the front. I also made the ears slightly smaller after placing the clay pieces onto the head. So just determine how big or how small you want your ears to be. Okay, we're almost done, and trust me, this project is finishable in one afternoon. But don't make the mistake of trying to make a neck out of paper like what I'm doing here. Unfortunately, it did not work because the paper wasn't heavy or strong enough to hold the head. So I decided to call it a day, or a weekend in my case, and not work on this till the following week, where I decided to just construct the neck fully out of clay. So anyways, in order to do this, I took half a pack of clay and rolled out a fat cylinder for the neck. It has to be thick enough to support the weight of the head, and letting it dry over the weekend was actually beneficial since now the head is a lot lighter than when the air-dried clay is still moist. So I'm going to attach the 2 pieces together, but since the head is already dry, it's not going to stick quite as well. So I made some clay slurry, which is just basically watered down clay, but it still sort of has some sort of adhesion. And I'm going to apply it to both surfaces to get them to bind together better. And then again, it's just the same repetition of using a scraper to combine the 2 and make everything all smooth. There was this kind of hollow part at the back of the neck, so I just filled that up with some clay. The neck also felt kind of long, and although it can work on some sculptures, I felt it didn't look exactly right here. So I ended up cutting off some of the clay at the bottom, and I tried to make the neck thicker nearing the bottom area. That's it for the clay part of this project, so I'll wait now till everything is dry enough to sand. After everything is dry, it's time to work on sanding. This is my least favorite part because it's tedious and messy, so the smoother you can get your clay to be before sanding to minimize this job, the better. But anyways, I am using 150 grit sandpaper here, which is pretty rough but works well to take out all of the dents and oddly formed areas of the clay. So you just rub it back and forth and then the clay will just pulverize and come off. Also remember to wear a face mask when sanding to keep the small particles from entering your nose and mouth areas. So once this is done, I am taking a dense bristle brush and dusting it all off. For the paint, I am doing my baking soda half, which is just basically adding baking soda to acrylic paint in a 1:3 ratio and painting that on for some added texture. I wanted this kind of to look like stone, so I just applied the paint going in all different directions, kind of like how you would do it when you are working with lime wash. I also took a little bit of brown paint and then put that on the toothbrush with a bit of water and just sprayed this on. That just adds a little bit more texture and a little bit of depth to the color of the paint. For the last part, instead of spraying with a clear acrylic spray, I decided to use wood glue mixed with water. This actually works surprisingly well to give a matte finish, and the glue helps the baking soda not flake off. You can totally skip this part if you are impatient, but I think this extra step was worth the effort. So after all of that, here is the final product. If you enjoyed this, please do consider giving this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing for future DIY and home improvement videos. Have a great week, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!